Welcome to Cause Before Symptom, uncovering the real cabal and spiritual forces that are controlling the world. And now, here is your host, James Carner.
Welcome to Cause Before Symptom. I'm your host, James Carner. Today is February 15th, 2026, and tonight's episode is all about part 26 of our examination of Hosea, the book of Hosea, between the Ethiopian Tewahedo Orthodox canon and the King James. Now, last night we did a recap of all of the books from Genesis up until Daniel. And we basically proved that the theology throughout the whole thing is exact. The arc of the theology is true. But we found out that the cadence and tone of the King James, although not written explicitly to be this way, it's just the English language makes the cadence and tone, and especially if you don't understand the Old English wording, you would read the King James and the Bible would come off as more of an angry God who is impulsive and impatient. And read side by side between the Ethiopian and the King James, you get the clearer, full picture of the actual Bible, which makes the Ethiopian translation that we did from Ge'ez to Amharic to English is true. And we're going to continue doing these shows until we're done with the King James. And then afterward, we're going to examine the Apocrypha that we translated from the Ethiopian and compare it directly with the King James to see if it and its tone and arc and if its theology is accurate. Meaning, should we have pulled out the Apocrypha like it was done, or should we have kept it in? Now, we have not found any evidence at all of Rome or the Catholic Church purposely changing the word or purposely removing Apocrypha on purpose. All we know is that during the times that they were being translated, they were locking down the word so that something like that could not happen. We don't know. We're still examining. This takes time. And I do believe that we are coming closer to the truth than we ever have before. Even though when I originally started this examination, I came in with an assumption that we would find Rome or find the Catholic Church in breach of making changes of it. But we just haven't found that yet. We're still at Hosea right now. We still have many more books to go to examine. So Hosea in the Old Testament speaks to the northern kingdom of Israel in the decades before its fall to Assyria. Unlike prophets who address exile from within foreign lands, Hosea warns while the nation still stands. The tone is deeply personal. Covenant violation is not framed merely as a legal breach, but as marital betrayal. The opening command to marry an unlawful woman becomes the central symbolic act of the book. The prophet's domestic life embodies divine grief. The structure moves from enacted prophecy to covenant accusation, from judgment to restrained compassion. The naming of Hosea's children, like Jezreel and Lo-Ruhamah and Lo-Ammi, announces consequence, as Israel has pursued other lovers, attributing provisions to idols rather than to the Lord, which is something Israel always continued to do. Now, idolatry is described as adultery, and forgetfulness becomes relational betrayal. Yet Hosea does not remain in accusation alone. The language shifts unexpectedly toward mercy. Discipline is described as hedging with thorns, yet the wilderness becomes the place of renewed speech. I will allure her, unquote, stands beside declarations of judgment. And the covenant is not erased, it's wounded and pursued. So the theological center of Hosea lies in the tension between justice and compassion. Divine anger is real, but it is not unrestrained. How shall I give up? Which is a quote in the book, reveals inner restraint. The Lord's holiness prevents indifference. His love prevents annihilation. Restoration culminates in renewed betrothal and promise of healing. Now, the Ethiopian Tewahedo Witness and the King James rendering, they share Hosea's relational and covenantal framework. Differences may emerge in tone, particularly in passages expressing divine jealousy or tenderness. But the theological arc remains consistent. Judgment disciplines, mercy restores. So the guiding question remains steady. Does translation alter theology, or does it shape cadence? Well, in Hosea, emotional resonance carries theological weight. Love betrayed. Justice spoken. Compassion remembered. The book ends not with divorce, but with an invitation to return to God. Shout out to everybody on the live chat Rumble. Number one warrior, we have Scorpion. Scorpion is number one, saying, hey, y'all. Hey, Pastor. I hope you're doing well. I am. Thank you for asking. Appreciate that. Number two warrior is Philip Del Piano, saying, hello, James, giving the hand wave, peace and prayer and the American flag. Thank you. God bless you, too. Number three warrior is the Boots Man, the Sparks Believer himself, saying, let's get ready to rumble. Hello, Pastor James, voice of Rumble Airwaves and creator of ElitePotion.com. Hello, warrior family. Hoping everyone is doing well. And if we could all hit that like button, that thumbs up button, thank you very much. Yes, if you could all do me a favor, take your thumb, follow me, and let's all go down to our phones and hit the X and then hit the thumbs up underneath my name and then hit live chat. You won't lose your spot, I promise. So there you have it. Guys, the next warrior is Robert Gertison, number 4, saying, hey, everyone. And in between all of the Rumble chat, they're all talking to each other. So let's get into breaking news.
Welcome to Shitty Breaking News with your host, James Carner, offering his shitty opinion.
So the FBI says glove has DNA evidence on it, and Savannah Guthrie is speaking out saying, oh, give us her mom back. Well, sorry it happened. It's still like literally in the number one spot of the news. Who knows what they're going to use this for? This could be a distraction, from us focusing on Trump and the pedophilia crap that's being exposed in the Epstein files that were released by the Democrats. Which is interesting because the Democrats really don't care who gets taken down as long as they can get Trump. Well, guys, this whole thing is about the ports. Trump and Orsini control all the ports in the red states. Meanwhile, China controls all the blue states and their ports. We're going to be talking about that in a second. But it's not about Savannah Guthrie and her mother. That's a distraction. Trump's border czar says a small security force will stay in Minnesota. Minnesota, interesting. Well, let's take a look at some information about Minnesota. In 2023, this was 6 years ago, the top 25 U.S. container ports, heavily concentrated on the coasts, handled 39 million loaded TEUs, or 20-foot equivalent units. Minnesota's port serves as vital multimodal and international gateways with the Duluth Superior Port on Lake Superior. They're handling over 35 million tons of cargo annually, specializing in iron ore and coal. Other key commercial ports include the Port of St. Paul, 13th largest in the world, and Port of Savage on the Mississippi River. They've got 2 harbors in Silver Bay through Lake Superior. They have the Port of St. Paul, Ports of Savage, and other key locations around the Grand Portage. And you'd be surprised at the difference between the blue states and the red states, where it seems that the blue states control most of the large shipping units. For example, Port of Los Angeles, California, blue state, 10.3 million TEUs in 2024. That's units per container in tons. Port of Long Beach, California, blue state, 9.6 million. Port of New York and New Jersey, blue state, well, mixed, 8.7 million. Houston, red state, 309.5 million. And they're quickly becoming blue, aren't they? Why? Because China controls the blue states. China controls Minnesota. The governors get paid by China. This is what they don't want you to know, that there is a war between our ports. And all of the protests that are going on with ICE is not the real issue of sending in the National Guard. Trump just needed an excuse to take over the ports. Like in Oregon. Oregon has a port. Portland, Oregon. A lot of cargo and containers go through the Columbia River. But the major ports are controlled by the blue. And this is what Trump is trying to bypass and get to. Because those blue states are not paying their fair share of federal taxes because they are being lenient to the ports that China has control over. So China can ship anything they want, as long as they have control of those ports. This is why Venezuela was important for us to control their ports and their oil in order to accept money in the US dollar. Nobody on the regular news is going to report that the problem with America right now is China and the Orsinis fighting over red and blue states. So they're throwing all kinds of stories to touch your heart or to scare you away from seeing the real truth. It's not the border czar sending a small security force. They ain't going to do shit. Minnesota is controlled by China, and that just can't happen under Trump because he calls China the threat, the enemy. He calls himself a war president because he's at war with China economically. And another world news event, winter storms could bring 8 feet of snow to parts of California. Who cares? But this gathers the attention and gets you off of China and the Orsinis. This story about Obama being upset about the clown show, about Trump's racist video post, it's to steer you off of the ports. Now, if the American people were educated enough beyond an 8th grade education, which that's where we are foundationally, we wouldn't be buying the propaganda that our news agencies and organizations are feeding us. And we would actually follow the money and figure out that this is a port war. And then we get next news items. What's next for Greenland and Ukraine? Ports. Ukraine is the top of the hub of Crimea so that Russia can export goods through the Ukraine into Crimea and out through the, what is it, the Black Sea? The war for control of Ukraine is to get goods to come in and out of Russia faster and easier and cheaper. They don't care about the Ukrainians. Russia cares about goods and services and making money off of that, whether it's the black market or not. And meanwhile, this war on the ports, Trump claims victory on affordability as public anxieties persist. There's no affordability anywhere in the United States except for, I believe, the state of Florida. I know because I was there not long ago, and a candy bar was 50 cents. Versus a candy bar here in Oregon, $1.50. Gas in Florida is cheaper. Well, Florida's a red state. Florida has ports. And Trump's trying to get the other ports in control of America and not a foreign country so that we can lower the prices to make affordability in America. But he's only playing his part and reading off of the script that he got from the Orsinis. Same with China. They're reading their script that they got from the Bank for International Settlements. And this whole Board of Peace thing. They're going to ship $5 billion in Gaza for reconstruction as a pledge. Well, who's going to take on those constructions? Well, friends of Trump, friends of the Orsinis. All that $5 billion is going to go back into the wicked. You see, it's simple. If you destroy a city, the leaders say, we must rebuild. There's your scheme. You can't make money off of rent from an old building. Time to flatten the land, rebuild, and raise the rent. This is Mobster 101. And items like Iran says potential energy, mining, and aircraft deals are on the table. Talks of the U.S. Again, distractions. Trump's trying to leave a legacy without being caught as one of them. Now, if God can take Nebuchadnezzar, force him to eat grass for 4 years and change him into a godly man, he could do so to Trump. But I'm not seeing it happen yet. And what's this Homeland Security shutdown going to do? Nothing. Because they do nothing anyway. Because all the money that they get goes to their contractor friends to build crap for Homeland Security to secure Americans. They don't secure dick. And they won't. And they don't care because you continue to let them stomp all over your freedoms, your rights, and your land. None of this is going to stop until you wake up and get out of the party system and start to figure out where you put your money. And of course, again, the Epstein files, there's a big fallout. The high-profile people are burned by the past dealings with the predator. Well, why are you not pushing Bill Gates to resign from his foundation? That's what I want to see, because Kill Gates is a pedophile. All right, we're going to go to a quick commercial. When we come back, we're going to be talking about tonight the Part 26 examination of Hosea during the Ethiopian Tewahedo Orthodox and the King James Bible. Stick around, guys.
Why do 75% of people feel exhausted all the time? The answer might surprise you. In the 1920s, Standard Oil decided to dive into medicine. They pushed synthetic petroleum into our drugs. Sure, it masked symptoms, but it wrecked our guts. Our good bacteria, which fight off parasites and heavy metals, got wiped out by crude oil. But here's the good news. We can fix this by going back to nature. Introducing Elite Potion, the world's top detox program. It restores your good bacteria by removing toxic threats like aluminum, strontium, barium, and parasites. Imagine feeling energized and alive again. They said there couldn't be a pill that did it all. We invented it. Visit elitepotion.com and reclaim your health from synthetic pharmaceuticals. Your body will thank you.
Hey, George, why is the IRS taking so much of my money? Why would you bring that binding contract onto my vessel? I thought we were all in the same boat and pay our taxes. You mean taxation without representation? You should have never worn a red coat on this ship with those ridiculous forms. You don't even live in D.C. I've been rolling in my grave since 1913. Why are you binding yourself to a contract to Washington, D.C. that has no bearing on you? For this reason, we set the 13 colonies free from this type of tax. Do you know what this document is? It protects you from a direct tax from the national government. Which of these would you rather live by? What about you? Do you also sign binding contracts every April 15th? Click the link below and regain your freedom.
All right, we're back. Examining Hosea between the Ethiopian canon and the King James Bible. Guys, thanks so much for being here. It is Sunday night, one day after Valentine's Day. Have you guys all recuperated from it? I know all you guys out there waited till the last minute and got candy and flowers at, 6 o'clock? Right before you walked into the door to meet the missus? Why is it that us guys just can't seem to think about this one date and keep it? Just keep it. And I'm not saying go out there and buy the capitalism, consumerism holiday of Valentine's Day, but a card at least. $3? Get a card. Draw a little smiley face, whatever. But recognition that you still love your partner. But when we do these things, and if we did it last year, we'd have to repeat. But we continue as gentlemen. Drop the ball. Except for me, this year I actually got my wife the oyster pearl inside an oyster she could take off and then pull that out, put it into a necklace. I saw it on TikTok and couldn't help it, and I bought it. It was only $25. All right, tonight we're talking about Hosea, the book, our examination between the Ethiopian canon and the King James. So Hosea begins with a command that feels impossible. The prophet is told to marry a wife of unfaithfulness. It's kind of like marry a hooker. That's pretty much what happened. Go marry a prostitute, Hosea. What? Now, most of you guys are like, dude, if she's a stripper, right on. But the marriage becomes a message here. His home becomes a parable. The children born into that union carry names that echo across the nation, like Jezreel, or Lo-Ruhamah, or Lo-Ammi. They're scattered. There's no mercy, not my people. Covenant language fractures in the mouths of children. So Israel runs after other lovers. This is an example. It's a parody of Israel. That's why God told Hosea to marry a stripper. Scorpion. Strippers throw down, man. Well, some do. Some are just really bad at it. Grain, wine, oil, silver. These are gifts of provision. And they're credited to, guess who? Baal or Baal. The Lord speaks not only as judge, but as a wounded husband. I can't believe my wife married a hooker. I can't believe my wife my husband married a stripper. divorced me and married a stripper. So the Lord speaks as a wounded husband. She did not know that I gave her grain. And the pain here is relational. The betrayal is intimate. Idolatry is not abstract disobedience. It is forgetfulness of love. And judgment comes in restraint. He says, I will hedge up her way with thorns, and the lovers will not satisfy. Prosperity will not endure. The wilderness runs, but not as annihilation, but as interruption. So the path is blocked, so the heart may open or awaken. Then the tone shifts. Therefore, behold, I will allure her. The wilderness becomes place of speech. The valley of trouble becomes door of hope. Judgment does not silence affection. Love persists through discipline. Philip, a massage therapy lady is the way to go. And then Boots, just a bad girlfriend. So apparently Boots has had a stripper for a girlfriend. Are they reliable, folks? Do they not stray? Hosea reveals divine tension. It says, how shall I give you up? And then anger rises, yet compassion restrains the anger. Holiness demands consequence here, folks, and mercy refuses abandonment. So the covenant trembles, but it does not dissolve. God's teaching us something here. And the promise then emerges, I will betroth you to me forever. Not temporary reconciliation, but renewed covenant. Faithfulness will replace infidelity. Knowledge of the Lord will replace ritual performance. So the Ethiopian Tewahedo witness and the King James rendering, they'll stand side by side in this examination. And in a book where jealousy, grief, and mercy intertwine, cadence then shapes perception profoundly. Hosea is not a cold denunciation. It is wounded love speaking truth. Justice disciplines. Compassion calls. The final word is not rejection, but return. Hosea opens with enacted prophecy rather than abstract proclamation. The command given to the prophet is startling. Translation must preserve both its severity and its symbolic function without sensationalism. The marriage is not a spectacle, it is a sign. Here it is in the Ethiopian Tewahedo Orthodox witness, and I quote, when the Lord began to speak by Hosea, the Lord said to Hosea, go, take yourself a wife of harlotry and children of harlotry, for the land has committed great harlotry by departing from the Lord. So he went out and took Gomer. This is it. The name of the stripper was Gomer. Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim. And she conceived and bore him a son. Gomer. I'm hoping Gomer was hot, because poor Hosea. It's like, which one, Lord? That one. Oh, shit. And she's like, you, come here. Get me a pack of smokes. Winston Lights. Well, the beginning of the word of the Lord by Hosea. All right, we're reading the King James Version now. The beginning of the word of the Lord by Hosea. And the Lord said to Hosea, go. Go, take unto thee a wife of whoredoms and children of whoredoms. For the land hath committed great whoredom, departing from the Lord. So he went and took Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, which conceived and bore him a son. Gomer. Well, the structural alignment here is strong. The Ethiopian rendering reads with contemporary clarity. Harlotry, in the King James, uses whoredoms, a term that in early modern English conveyed covenantal infidelity rather than mere vulgarity. And the modern ears, two modern ears, tone may feel sharper here, but theology remains consistent. The marriage mirrors national betrayal. The phrase, the land has committed great harlotry, well, that establishes the symbolic intent. Hosea's union represents Israel's spiritual adultery, and tone must preserve metaphorical meaning without reducing it to crude accusation. Then the first child is named by divine instruction. It says in the Ethiopian, and I quote, "Call his name Jezreel, for in a little while I will avenge the bloodshed of Jezreel on the house of Jehu." Here's that same in the King James rendering. "Call his name Jezreel for yet a little while, and I will avenge the blood of Jezreel upon the house of Jehu." So the name Jezreel recalls historical violence and signals impending judgment. Translation must preserve historical reference without losing covenant context here. The child's name becomes prophetic announcement. Now, theologically, this opening chapter establishes that covenant breach is relational and consequential. Israel's idolatry is not framed as mere ritual deviation, but as marital betrayal. And tone really determines whether the passage is heard as harsh condemnation or wounded fidelity. The Ethiopian phrasing emphasizes clarity and symbolic structure, and the King James cadence intensifies solemnity through archaic diction, but neither alters doctrine. So this should anchor Hosea's emotional framework. The prophet's obedience embodies divine grief. The marriage is not romanticized, it's prophetic. And the examination continues, listening for whether translation does preserve this balance of symbol and covenant seriousness. In Hosea, prophecy begins at home. The relationship reflects the rupture. The message is lived before it is preached. Go, marry Gauma. So Hosea's enacted prophecy deepens through naming of his children. Each name is not merely personal, but covenantal. Translation must preserve both the literal meaning here and the names of their theological force, so tone here must remain restrained. The severity of the names carries weight without rhetorical excess. In the Ethiopian, it says, and I quote, "And she conceived again and bore a daughter. Then God said to him, call her name Lo-Ruhamah, for I will no longer have mercy on the house of Israel, but I will utterly take them away." Here's that same in the King James Version. And she conceived again and bore a daughter. And God said unto him, call her name Lo-Ruhamah, for I will no more have mercy upon the house of Israel, but I will utterly take them away. So here the structure aligns closely. The Ethiopian reads with contemporary clarity, like I will no longer have mercy, but the King James cadence intensifies solemnity through I will no more have mercy. But still, both preserve the covenant tension as mercy is restrained because rebellion persists. But the whole book of Hosea is about showing everyone what the children of Israel did through the marriage of Hosea and Gomer. Gauma. The next child intensifies the message of the Lord. Here it is in the Ethiopian. Now when she had weaned Lo-Ruhamah, she conceived and bore a son. Then God said, call his name Lo-Ammi, for you are not my people, and I will not be your God. This is kind of a breakup call here, folks. But he always gives us a chance to come back. Here it is in the same, but King James. Now when she had weaned Lo-Ruhamah, she conceived and bore a son. Then said God, call his name Lo-Ammi, for ye are not my people, and I will not be your God. So the alignment here is very strong. The Ethiopian rendering reads relationally direct. You are not my people. The King James retains covenantal cadence. Ye are not my people. but the theological weight is immense. The covenant formula appears reversed. Yet immediately hope interrupts judgment. Meaning, if you're reading the King James cadence, you could get a feeling of grief and no hope. But in the Ethiopian, it reads as if everything's going to be okay. Just watch. God always comes back. He always does. Here it is in the Ethiopian witness. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, and it shall come to pass in the place where it was said to them, you are not my people. There it shall be said to them, you are sons of the living God. Here's that in the same, but in the King James. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, and it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, ye are not my people, there it shall be said unto them, ye are the sons of the living God. See what happened there? The reversal is preserved clearly in both witnesses. The covenant rupture is not final. The language of rejection becomes language of restoration. So tone must preserve this dramatic shift without sentimentalizing it. Sentimentalizing it. Some words I have problems with. Can't help it. Theologically, these names embody covenant consequence. Mercy is withheld. Identity is fractured. Yet promise remains anchored in earlier covenant language. The sand of the sea recalls Abrahamic promise. Tone determines whether this section is heard as absolute rejection or disciplined correction. The Ethiopian phrasing emphasizes clarity and relational immediacy, but the King James heightens the solemn covenant resonance, but neither still alter doctrine. So this advances Hosea's central tension here as judgment is announced through the names of children. Mercy is then restored, but it's not erased. He says, not my people becomes future promise of renewed sonship. He's saying, you're not my people, the father, now you're going to be the son's people. Does that make sense? Remember, the father came and dwelled with the children of Israel. The Father was the one who said, you, children of Israel, are mine. Does that make sense? Now he's giving them over to Jesus because he's trying to teach us that following just the Father is impossible. But following the Son is the solution. So we must continue listening for whether the translation preserves both severity and the reversal. In Hosea, the children carry prophecy, but covenant memory does carry hope. Now, after the symbolic naming of the children, Hosea moves from enacted sign to explicit accusation. The tone sharpens. The Lord speaks not only through imagery, but through direct indictment. Translation again must preserve emotional force here without any exaggeration, as the accusation is relational but not abstract. Here it is in the Ethiopian, I quote, bring charges against your mother. Bring charges, for she is not my wife, nor am I her husband. Let her put away her harlotries from her sight, and her adulteries from between her breasts. Here it is in the King James. Plead with your mother. Plead, for she is not my wife, neither am I her husband. Let her therefore put away her whoredoms out of her sight, and her adulteries from between her breasts. The structure seems parallel. The Ethiopian reads with contemporary clarity, bring charges, while the King James phrase says plead. Well, that reflects older covenant legal terminology, but both still preserve the legal and relational dimensions of the accusations. However, if you read the King James, you may not pick up on the fact that the father is giving his children to his son. The imagery continues. Here it is in the Ethiopian, I quote, for she said, I will go after my lovers who give me my bread and my water, my wool and my linen, my oil and my drink. I gotta get my booze and my smokes. Here's 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 the same. Oh my God. I just gotta get my smokes for a minute. Here it is in the King James rendering. For she said, I will go after my lovers that give me my bread and my water, my wool and my flax, mine oil and my drink. Well, the alignment is very close. The King James corresponds to linen, but in the Ethiopian it's flax. Flax in the King James corresponds to linen in the Ethiopian rendering. So both still preserve the attribution of provision to false sources. So tone, again, emphasizes forgetfulness rather than just mere greed. Then the Lord responds, here it is in the Ethiopian, I quote, she did not know that I gave her grain, new wine, and oil, and multiplied her silver and gold, which they prepared for Baal. Here's that same in the King James. For she did not know that I gave her corn and wine and oil and multiplied her silver and gold, which they prepared for Baal. So the Ethiopian rendering reads plainly. The King James uses corn for grain. Reflecting historical English usage, the theological point remains clear, however. Misattributed blessing is betrayal. Isn't that right, Gomer? So the consequence then follows. Here it is in the Ethiopian Witness. Therefore, I quote, therefore I will return and take away my grain in its time. I will uncover her lewdness in the sight of her lovers. Now here's that in the King James Version. Therefore will I return and take away the corn of the time thereof, and I will discover her lewdness in the sight of her lovers. So the language of exposure reflects covenant shame. Translation must preserve this metaphor without sensationalism. The stripping is judicial, but it's not gratuitous. Theologically, this clarifies the root of judgment. Israel's sin is not ignorance of law, but misdirected affection. Idolatry is framed as adultery. Provision is attributed to Baal rather than the Lord. So, again, tone determines whether the passage is heard as harsh, denunciation, or wounded fidelity. The Ethiopian phrasing emphasizes relational clarity. The King James cadence deepens solemnity through repetition and archaic terms, but neither alters doctrine. So this intensifies Hosea's central theme. Covenant breach is personal. The Lord speaks as a husband and as a judge. Yet even within accusation, the goal is return. Meaning, you cheated on me, so I'm going to give you to my son, because he can handle it a lot better than I can. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son. This is why Jesus becomes our Lord, because we will never be perfect enough to serve the Father. But because we are part of Jesus, we will be perfect in God's sight and always be his. And the Father will be pleased with that. Love is covenantal. The betrayal was named clearly. So after the accusation of spiritual adultery, the tone then shifts from indictment to imposed restraint. The Lord declares that he will intervene, but not to annihilate, but to interrupt. Translation again preserves this distinction. The discipline described is severe, yet it's purposeful. Here it is in the Ethiopian, and I quote, therefore, behold, I will hedge her I will hedge up her way with thorns and wall her in so that she cannot find her paths. She will chase her lovers, but not overtake them. Yes, she will seek them, but not find them. Then she will say, I will go and return to my first husband, for then it was better for me than now. Here's that same in the King James. Therefore, behold, I will hedge up thy way with thorns and make a wall, and she shall not find her paths. And she shall follow after her lovers, but she shall not overtake them, and she shall seek them, but shall not find them. Then shall she say, I will go and return to my first husband, for then was it better with me than now. So the alignment between the both cadence is very strong. The Ethiopian reads with contemporary clarity, wall her in. The King James retains the phrase, make a wall, but both preserve the metaphor of restriction. The hedge, it's not cruelty, it's just containment. And the language of pursuit and failure underscores futility. Lovers cannot satisfy. Idols cannot provide. Tone, again, must be preserved, or must preserve frustration without any melodrama. Then the wilderness motif reappears. Here it is in the Ethiopian. Therefore, behold, behold, I will allure her, will bring her into the wilderness and speak comfort to her. Here's the same in the King James. Therefore, behold, I will allure her and bring her into the wilderness and speak comfortably unto her. Well, the shift is remarkable. The wilderness, once a symbol of deprivation, becomes place of renewed speech. The Ethiopian phrasing reads very gentle, speak comfort to her. The King James phrase, speak comfortably, still reflects older English meaning to speak tenderly, but nobody knew this. And the theological movement is from restraint to reconciliation. Then the promise continues. Here it is in the Ethiopian. I will give her vineyards from there, and the valley of Achor, or Acre, in the valley of Acre, Achor, as a door of hope. Now here's that same in the King James rendering. And I will give her vineyards from thence, and the valley of Acre for a door of hope. Well, the valley of Acre, once associated with trouble, becomes entry point to restoration. Translation, again, must preserve this reversal very clearly. And theologically, the section reframes discipline. The hedge is not final judgment. It is interruption designed to redirect affection. The wilderness becomes environment for renewal rather than destruction. Tone then determines whether the passage is heard as punitive or redemptive. So the Ethiopian phrasing emphasizes clarity and tenderness in this shift. The King James cadence deepens solemnity through rhythm and repetition, but neither, again, alters doctrine. So this advances Hosea's covenant tension as judgment restrains, mercy pursues. The path is blocked so that return becomes possible. So again, we must continue listening, whether the translation preserves the balance of severity and allure. Well, in Hosea, discipline is not abandonment. It's preparation for a renewed betrothal. And he did it in symbolism from a family. Hosea. He didn't tell the entire people or the Israelite people to go marry whores and have whore children. God is setting the example through this book, saying how he is going to restore them even though they cheated on him. Meaning he's giving his spouse a second chance, even after she committed adultery. This should be a lesson for those who have a spouse that committed adultery on them, and they haven't forgiven them because God did. So again, we must continue listening for whether translation here preserves this balance of severity and allure. In Hosea, discipline is not abandonment. It's preparation for renewed betrothal. Now, Hosea's language reaches a turning point in this section. After accusation and discipline, the Lord speaks with surprising tenderness. The tone must be preserved carefully, folks. Mercy does not erase judgment, but it actually emerges through it. So translation, again, must maintain both intensity and gentleness here without any distortion. Here it is in the Ethiopian, I quote, "And it shall be in that day, says the Lord, that you will call me my husband and no longer call me my master." That's a big difference. This is, we actually go from a master to servant to father and son. "For I will take from her mouth the names of the Baals, and they shall be remembered by their name no more." Here's that same in the King James. "And it shall be at that day, saith the Lord, that thou shalt call me Ishi, and shalt call me no more Baali or Baali. For I will take away the names of Balaam out of her mouth, and they shall no more be remembered by their name." So the Ethiopian rendering clarifies a relational nuance here. My husband versus my master. The King James retains the Hebrew forms of Ishi and Baali or Baali, which carry layered meaning. Ishi conveys intimate husband. Baali can mean master, but echoes Baal worship. Translation decisions here shape the tone. The theological shift is relational intimacy replacing distorted authority. But reading it from the King James without understanding all of this, you may be very confused. Well, wait a minute, you're going to switch me from being the husband of the father to Baali? I don't get it. Then the promise continues. In the Ethiopian Witness it is, and I quote, "In that day I will make a covenant for them with the beasts of the field, with the birds of the air, and with the creeping things of the ground. Bow and sword of battle I will shatter from the earth to make them lie down safely." Here's that same in the King James. "And in that day will I make a covenant for them with the beasts of the field, and with the fowls of heaven, and with the creeping things of the ground. And I will break the bow and the sword and the battle out of the earth, and will make them lie down safely." So that's when Jesus comes. We're going to return to our new bodies, which are the same bodies that Adam and Eve originally had before the fall. The structure aligns closely, and the Ethiopian phrasing reads with clarity. The King James cadence deepens the solemn rhythm, but both still preserve covenant renewal, extending beyond human relationship into creation order. Remember, we're going to go back to Eden. That's where we are called. Eden was our home before the fallen angels decided they wanted to have their way with us. Well, all judgment is going to be on the fallen angels in the end. And in the end, after the trial, because you are either going to be a witness or a jury, after the trial, you'll have your choice of staying with Jesus in heaven and making him your Lord, or just deny him there and move on and just blank out, meaning you're not going to exist anymore. That's what the lake of fire is. It's a recycle bin of spirits. So the climax then is betrothal language. Here it is in the Ethiopian. "I will betroth you to me forever. Yes, I will betroth you to me in righteousness and justice, in loving kindness and mercy. I will betroth you to me in faithfulness, and you shall know the Lord." Here's that same in the King James. And I will betroth thee unto me forever. Yea, I will betroth thee unto me in righteousness and in judgment and in loving kindness and in mercies. I will even betroth thee unto me in faithfulness, and thou shalt know the Lord. The repetition here, I think, is intentional. The Ethiopian wording emphasizes justice, where the King James reads judgment. Both reflect covenant righteousness, but the phrase loving kindness preserves the depth of the hest. So the theological core remains intact, but restoration is definitely relational and permanent. However, some people could take judgment and justice and see an angry God here. But theologically, this section reveals that mercy does not compromise holiness. Righteousness, justice, loving kindness, and faithfulness all frame renewed covenant. And the intimacy of betroth, that replaces estrangement of not my people. So tone, again, determines whether this passage is heard as sentimental or solemn. The Ethiopian phrasing highlights clarity and warmth, saying justice instead of judgment. But the King James, that cadence intensifies the gravity through repetition and poetic rhythm, but again, neither alters doctrine. So this should mark Hosea's emotional apex: judgment, restrained affection. Discipline opened wilderness. Now covenant is renewed in faithfulness. So again, we must continue listening for whether translation preserves the balance of justice and tenderness. Well, in Hosea, mercy is not weakness. It is covenant fidelity restored. Hosea then turns from relational imagery back to direct covenant indictment, and the tone sharpens again. The Lord does not merely accuse Israel of idolatry. He exposes hollow worship. Just, the nod to God crowd. And translation must preserve both the severity here of the charge and the clarity of what is lacking. Because the issue is not absence of sacrifice alone, but absence of knowledge. For even God said, my people perish for lack of knowledge. Here it is in the Ethiopian, and I quote, "Hear the word of the Lord, you children of Israel, for the Lord brings a charge against the inhabitants of the land. There is no truth or mercy or knowledge of God in the land." Here that is in the King James rendering. "Hear the word of the Lord, ye children of Israel, for the Lord hath a controversy with the inhabitants of the land, because there is no truth, nor mercy, nor knowledge of God in the land." Here, the Ethiopian phrasing reads plainly, brings a charge. The King James uses hath a controversy. That's reflecting a covenant lawsuit language. Both do preserve the legal tone, however, and the absence of knowledge of God stands at the center. So the accusation then intensifies. Here it is in the Ethiopian again. "By swearing and lying, killing and stealing, and committing adultery, they break all restraint, with bloodshed upon bloodshed." That's all they did. Here it is in the King James. "By swearing and lying and killing and stealing and committing adultery, they break out, and blood toucheth blood." Well, the Ethiopian phrase break all restraint clarifies the moral collapse here. The King James break out, that preserves an older idiom, but both convey escalating violence. But here's the thing. This is exactly what God is trying to say. He's saying these are the biggest things that if you do them, I cannot be near you. This is basically Hosea saying, if you want to know the scale of hard sin against all, he's saying by swearing, which, basically cursing people out, saying fuck you or things like that. Not swearing as in saying, oh, fuck, when you hit your thumb on a nail or hammer. God's not mad at you using foul language. But if you cuss people out, that hurts them. Words hurt. But otherwise, Paul just says it's empty words. But he's saying here, by swearing and lying and killing and stealing and committing adultery, these things are the biggies, and you continue to do them. And they always lead to bloodshed. Always. Anyone who starts swearing, then turns to lying, and then maybe killing, they'll be stealing and eventually committing adultery. All of these things together are demons that know each other and work well to each other. The demon of, cursing, the demon of lying, the demon of killing, the demon of stealing, the demon of committing adultery. These are all of the big ones here that Israel committed against the Father. But he loves them so much, he's giving them the Son. So the theological climax, it then emerges later. Here it is in the Ethiopian. For I desire mercy and not sacrifice, and the knowledge of God more than burnt offerings. Here's that same in the King James. For I desired mercy and not sacrifice, and the knowledge of God more than burnt offerings. Basically, he's saying, I desired mercy, meaning if you stop cursing, stealing, killing, destroying, if you stop doing what Satan's MO is, you're in God's mercy. And don't do it for sacrifice, because you can't shed someone else's blood and pay your own atonement. So the alignment is nearly intact between both. The Ethiopian word desire and the King James word desired, they differ slightly in tense expression, but the theological meaning remains steady. Ritual without covenant fidelity is insufficient, meaning they were sacrificing people to Baal. They were witches and warlocks and cutting the throats and spilling the blood, and they're saying, well, surely if we did this to animals and received grace in God's eyes, killing man like Cain did, we should receive the same. But the phrase knowledge of God carries covenant depth. It is relational awareness, not intellectual awareness alone. Thus, translation must preserve this distinction, as Hosea does not abolish sacrifice. He exposes empty ritual detachment from mercy and truth. Theologically, this section clarifies that the root problem is not ceremonial deficiency, but relational ignorance. Israel performs rites, yet lacks fidelity. Mercy, truth, and knowledge are covenant essentials, and they just couldn't follow any of that. And tone, again, determines whether this passage is heard as rejection of worship or correction of it. But the Ethiopian phrasing emphasizes clarity and ethical focus. The King James cadence, it deepens solemnity through parallelism and repetition, but neither alters doctrine. So this reinforces Hosea's central claim. Covenant love requires knowledge. Ritual without relationship collapses. The Lord seeks mercy, not performance. So the examination continues, listening again for whether translation preserves this balance of ethical demand and relational longing. In Hosea, true worship is knowledge embodied in mercy. Now, Hosea shifts from accusation to invitation, and the tone softens without abandonment seriousness. The call here is communal. The people who were named, not my people, are invited to return. And he even sent his son for them, and they killed him. I'm telling you, man, God used the worst of the people to fall in love with and work with. So translation here must preserve both urgency and hope. Here it is in the Ethiopian. Come, let us return to the Lord, for he has torn, but he will heal us. He has struck, but he will bind us up. After 2 days, he will revive us, and on the third day, he will raise us up, that we may live before him. Here's that same in the King James. Come, and let us return unto the Lord, for he hath torn, and he will heal us. He hath smitten, and he will bind us up. After 2 days will he revive us, and the third day he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. Well, it sounds like Jesus. After 3 days, he rose from the dead. The alignment between both cadence are close. The Ethiopian phrasing reads with clarity and immediacy, yet the King James cadence deepens solemnity through rhythmic repetition. So, he hath torn, he hath smitten. Well, the theological movement remains consistent. The one who wounds in discipline also heals in mercy. Then the appeal to God continues. Here it is in the Ethiopian. Let us know, let us pursue the knowledge of the Lord. His coming forth is established as the morning. He will come to us like the rain. Here it is in the King James. Then shall we know if we follow on to know the Lord. His going forth is prepared as the morning, and he shall come unto us as the rain. Tone here becomes crucial as the Ethiopian phrasing emphasizes the active pursuit, let us pursue, while the King James retains the layered conditional structure, if we follow on to know. Did you catch that, or did it sound the same? Because every time I read the Ethiopian one, the other one you understand already. But if you didn't read the Ethiopian one, you wouldn't understand this one. You get what I'm saying? Both preserve the covenant emphasis here, guys. Knowledge of God is relational fidelity, not ritual compliance. So the imagery of morning and rain reinforces the reliability. Morning arrives without fail. Rain nourishes and restores, and discipline has occurred, but covenant faithfulness remains dependable. So theologically, this section reveals that return is possible because mercy persists. The wound was corrective but not destructive. The language of revival, he shall raise us up, well, that echoes restoration beyond mere survival. It anticipates renewal of covenantal life. Therefore, tone determines whether this passage feels fragile or even confident. Thus, the Ethiopian phrasing highlights the clarity and forward movement, while the King James intensifies assurance through poetic rhythm. But neither, again, alters doctrine. So this advances Hosea's central tension. The Lord calls for return. The people are urged to pursue knowledge. Healing follows repentance. And again, we must listen further to preserve the urgency and hope here in translation. Because in Hosea, the call to return is not forced. It's an invitation grounded in covenant mercy. Then, Hosea reaches one of its most profound theological moments in this section. The tone shifts inward. Basically, that's where the Holy Spirit's going to live after Jesus dies for our sins and then sends the Holy Ghost. The Lord speaks not only in accusation or invitation, but in revealed tension. Translation must preserve the gravity here without dramatizing before or beyond the text. So the emotional depth here carries doctrinal weight. Here it is in the Ethiopian. This is the representative portion. How shall I give you up, O Ephraim? How shall I hand you over, O Israel? How shall I make you like Admah? How shall I set you like Zeboim? My heart is turned within thee. My compassion is stirred together. He's saying, I can't deal with you on the earth when the Father is here in your presence, but I can do it by sending my Son to pay the atonement so that you don't have to be holy like he is. Because when you try to be holy, you can't do it anyway. And if you think you can be holy, I challenge you. Go try. You will fall. We will all continue to fall until the day we die, because we live in a fallen world. You're going to make mistake after mistake after mistake. Now, the mistakes may be longer and longer throughout periods, which is good because you're finally repenting. But mistakes will still happen. You're not perfect. Jesus came to be perfect, so you didn't have to. And here, Hosea is saying, I am going to turn your heart, or my heart is turned within me. He's saying, I am not going to rule you as a father externally. I am going to love you as a dad inside your heart. That's kind of cool. Now, when you've read Hosea, did you read it? I've read it many times. I didn't see that. Here it is in the King James. How shall I give thee up, Ephraim? How shall I deliver thee, Israel? How shall I make thee as Admah? How shall I set thee as Zeboim? Mine heart is turned within me. My repenting are kindled together. My repentings. So the alignment's close, but tonal nuance differs. My repentings versus my compassion. The Ethiopian phrasing emphasizes compassion being stirred, while the King James uses repentings or kindled. That's an older English expression that conveys deep internal movement rather than a literal change of mind. But both still preserve the intensity of divine restraint if you knew this. The passage continues with a declaration of controlled judgment. Here it is in the Ethiopian. I will not execute my fierceness of my anger. I will not again destroy Ephraim, for I am God and not man, the Holy One in your midst. Here's that in the King James. I will not execute the fierceness of mine anger. I will not return to destroy Ephraim, for I am God and not man, the Holy One in the midst of thee. The theological center becomes explicit. Divine holiness distinguishes God from human retaliation. Anger here is real, but it is governed by covenant identity. Translation must preserve this balance very carefully. So the phrase, I am God and not man, anchors the passage. The restraint of destruction flows from divine nature. As holiness does not negate compassion, it just simply defines it. So theologically, this reveals that justice does not conceal mercy or cancel mercy. No. The Lord's compassion interrupts final annihilation, meaning he still comes back. Thus, the cities that are named Admah and Zeboim have total recall destruction in earlier judgment. Thus, Israel will not be erased in the same way. So tone determines whether this passage is heard as emotional volatility by God or sovereign mercy. The Ethiopian phrasing emphasizes stirred compassion. The King James cadence deepens solemnity through repetition and archaic phrasing. But neither again alters doctrine. So this stands at the emotional heart of Hosea. As covenant has been violated, judgment has been declared, yet compassion restrains final ruin. He says, you cheated on me, but I'm going to send you my son, and I'm going to live in you now. It's not going to be an outward thing. I'm going to be in you now. We're going to change the game here. We're going to make it even easier for you to become my child. So again, we must listen because compassion restrains the final ruin. And we need to listen whether translation, again, preserves this balance of holiness and tenderness. Because in Hosea, divine love does not ignore sin. It refuses to abandon covenant entirety. So after accusation, after discipline, appeal, and revealed compassion, Hosea then moves toward restoration. The tone becomes forward-looking without denying prior judgment. Translation, again, must preserve hope without softening the covenant seriousness here. The restoration described is not sentimental. It is transformative. You're going to be something new. And this is predicting Jesus. This is Hosea predicting Jesus. And all throughout this examination, we have seen that God continues to try to love us just through the Father, but we just won't. He's too powerful, glorious, and perfect that we just naturally push him away. So he wanted to do this first as proof, so we know that we can't be like him. So he sends his son so we can be like his son. And if we can't be better or like his son, the son and his atonement paid for that. So it's not sentimental, it's transformative. Because the older you get, the closer you get to God through his Son. Here it is in the Ethiopian Tewahedo Orthodox Witness, and I quote, I will heal their backsliding. I will love them freely, for my anger has turned away from him. I will be like the dew to Israel. He shall grow like the lily and lengthen his roots like Lebanon. Here's the same in the King James rendering. I will heal their backsliding. I will love them freely, for mine anger is turned away from him. I will be as the dew unto Israel, and shall grow as the lily, and cast forth his roots as Lebanon. The alignment here is very strong. The Ethiopian phrasing reads with clarity, lengthen his roots. The King James retains the older idiom, cast forth his roots, but both preserve the imagery of stability and flourishing. Meaning there's nothing to worry about here. And as we have examined every single book all the way up until now, from Genesis to Hosea, we've learned that we have nothing to fear and nothing to worry about, and God continues to love us and find alternative ways to get us closer to him. Both preserve the imagery of stability and flourishing, and the dew symbolizes quiet renewal rather than dramatic intervention, meaning he takes his time. And dew in the morning is beautiful. Have you ever had a cup of coffee right when the sun's coming up and you walk through just a little patch of grass with dew on it? It's beautiful. And then see your tracks through the dew. The imagery then continues. Here it is in the Ethiopian. His branches shall spread, his beauty shall be like the olive tree, and his fragrance like Lebanon. Here's the same in the King James. His branches shall spread, and his beauty shall be as the olive tree, and his smell as Lebanon. So the difference here between fragrance and smell reflects modern language shift. The King James usage was neutral in its time. And the Ethiopian rendering does clarify positive connotation for contemporary readers. Theology remains unchanged. Restoration produces fruitfulness and stability. So the covenant relationship is then renewed. Here it is again in the Ethiopian rendering. Ephraim shall say, what have I to do any more with idols? King James says, Ephraim shall say, what have I to do any more with idols? Well, the renunciation of idolatry signals genuine return. Restoration includes transformed allegiance. So theologically, this section reveals that healing addresses backsliding, not merely consequence. Love is described as free, undeserved yet intentional. Anger is not permanent. Covenant mercy restores identity. Please tell me you guys are picking up on what I'm picking up. Every single book does not show a wrathful God. It shows the people being so wrathful and vengeful against him. Why are we looking at God in the same way as we did years ago after studying all the way up until now? Because covenant mercy restores the identity here. God's not angry. So tone again determines whether this passage is heard as sentimental promise or covenant renewal. The Ethiopian phrasing emphasizes clarity and organic growth. The King James cadence deepens the solemnity through rhythm and repetition, but neither again alters any doctrine. God's not the one cheating on him. God's not the one lying to his children. God's not the one stealing, killing, and destroying. They're doing it. And yet he continues to offer ways out. He continues to coo them back to him. So this completes Hosea's restorative arc. The hedge of thorns gives way to dew. Idols are renounced. Then roots deepen. Have your roots deepened since you've come to this show and learned what you know now? Have your roots deepened through the knowledge that you're getting from this show? I'll tell you that my roots have deepened, and I'm happy for it. So again, we must continue listening for whether translation preserves this movement from discipline to flourishing. In Hosea, mercy does not erase justice. It transforms the heart and reestablishes covenant faithfulness. And since I've been doing this show, I and my heart have been renewing. And I have been reestablishing my covenant with him. I am not so worried anymore about being a sinner. I'm just being me. And the more I love my neighbor, the more I see people around me are happier in my presence. I've been hanging out with people who have historically been angry, moody, tough to be around. Yet they want to be around me. And it's not because I'm being something that's ingenuine. I'm just showing them love. And I'm showing them that I'm genuinely interested in our conversation and my love for them. Philip says, well, I'm not happy with all the genocide around the world, mostly Christian people. Not too happy with God about that. Well, Jesus said this would happen. He said, if you follow me, you will be persecuted. So I'm sorry you're not happy with that, but you see, when you are righteous, you will see the genocide. And Jesus even said, when you follow me, you're going to be up against the enemy. You're going to have a target on your back. You know, they say, this is the good news. Well, when you make a disciple, when you bring someone to Christ, their life, it's going to be blessed. They're going to see things more clearly, but it's going to get harder. That's not good news. But you can't follow God by being a hooligan. You can't follow God by being a slave. The only way to follow God is to give up. And Philip, if you have a desire to know why these things happen, then ask the Holy Spirit. He will tell you why. In my book, The Crown of Cain, it explains why the genocide happens to Christians and why they do what they do to children. Because they have found their own justification and jurisdiction for it through Cain and his magic. So Hosea closes not with extended narrative, but with distilled exhortation, because the tone becomes reflective and judicial at once. The prophet summarizes the covenant pattern, and rebellion then brings stumbling. Righteousness brings stability. So translation must preserve clarity, again, without flattening the poetic force. Here it is in the Ethiopian. O Israel, return to the Lord your God, for you have stumbled because of your iniquity. Take words with you and return to the Lord. Say to him, take away all iniquity, receive us graciously. Here's that same in the King James. O Israel, return unto the Lord thy God, for thou hast fallen by thine iniquity. Take with you words and turn to the Lord. Say unto him, take away all iniquity and receive us graciously. So the alignment is close. The Ethiopian reads with direct clarity, you've stumbled. The King James, thou hast fallen, that carries solemn cadence, but both preserve accountability and invitation. And the prayer of return is verbal and conscious. Take words with you emphasizes repentance expressed, not merely felt. Covenant restoration is relational and spoken. But the book closes with wisdom language. Here it is in the Ethiopian. Who is wise? Let him understand these things. Who is prudent? Let him know them. For the ways of the Lord are right. The righteous walk in them, but transgressors stumble in them. Here's the same in the King James. Who is wise, and he shall understand these things, prudent, and he shall know them. For the ways of the Lord are right, and the just shall walk in them, but the transgressors shall fall therein. So the Ethiopian phrasing, it clarifies progression here. Righteous walk, transgressors stumble, but the King James retains parallelism and cadence. The just shall walk, while the transgressors shall fall. The theological structure remains unchanged, and the same path yields stability for the righteous and collapse for the rebellious. So theologically, Hosea ends with covenant simplicity, and the issue is not complexity of ritual, but posture of your heart. Return is possible, healing is offered, and the ways of the Lord are consistent. But tone determines whether the closing sounds like warning alone or invitation joined to warning. And the Ethiopian rendering emphasizes clarity and moral structure, while the King James deepens solemnity through poetic compression, but neither alters doctrine. So Hosea concludes where it begins, with a call to return. Betrayal was real, discipline was necessary, compassion prevailed, but the final words was wisdom. The Lord's ways are right. Those who walk in them live. Those who resist then stumble. So to conclude, Hosea stands as one of the most intimate prophetic books in Scripture. Unlike proclamations delivered solely in courts or visions of distant empires, Hosea's message unfolds within marriage, family, and wounded affection. Covenant is not presented as contract alone, but as relationship violated and pursued. Throughout this examination, the Ethiopian witness and King James have preserved Hosea's central arc: enacted prophecy through marriage, the naming of children as covenant signs, accusation of spiritual adultery, imposed discipline, divine appeal, restrained anger, and renewed betrothal. The theological structure remains intact across both traditions, and differences that appear are largely tonal. The Ethiopian phrasing often reads with contemporary clarity and relational immediacy, while the King James carries solemn resonance through archaic cadence, and archaic diction, and rhythmic repetition. But expressions such as harlotry, whoredom, shame, and confusion, fragrance, and smell, they all shape emotional perception without altering the doctrine. So Hosea reveals a God who disciplines but does not abandon, who wounds in order to heal, who declares judgment yet asks, "How shall I give you up?" Well, holiness restrains indifference here. Compassion restrains annihilation. And the covenant trembles, but it's not erased. So the guiding question remains steady. Does translation alter theology, or does it shape the cadence? Well, in Hosea, the theology of covenant, love, hest, remains constant. H-E-S-E-D, hest. But what shifts is emotional texture. Hosea ends not with permanent rejection, but with invitation and wisdom. Return, take words. The ways of the Lord are right. So the betrayal was real, and discipline was necessary, and mercy prevailed. That is the covenant that stands renewed. This has been Cause Before Symptom. I'm your host, James Garner. Tune in tomorrow night when God gives me another revelation to tell you guys all about. Thank you so much. I love you guys. God bless you. God keep you, and good night.
This has been Cause Before Symptom with your host, James Garner. Go to his website, jamesgarner.com, and sign up for his newsletter. Also, download his free books on the breath war, the crown of blood, and the ritual machine. Fix your body by buying his award-winning detox formula, removing heavy metals and parasites. You'll feel better and live longer. Go to elitepotion.com. And one more thing, please. Just try and love your neighbor, because if you do, the world would be a better place. See you tomorrow.